Hello everyone, welcome back. So this time we're going to continue working on for loops. So I'm going to give you a little bit more advanced example this time where we're going to walk through several steps in building a for loop and fixing this for loop. So what do I want to do? Well, what I want to do is I have a grade book right here and I want to take the average of that grade book. Now there's ways I can do this in a couple simple functions, but we're practicing for loops, so we're going to use a for loop to do it. Now, what are we going to need to do this? We're going to take an average, but we have to add all the grades together, and you can see I've already got a variable that's adding them together. That works, but I also need to count how many grades are there, because it's the average divided by how many there are. So that's how you do, it's the sum divided by how many there are. That's how you do an average. Okay, so what does it tell me to do? It says define a variable called count before your for loop. Okay, we'll count. And that's going to be equal to 0. And it says set the value of count to increase by 1 each loop. Well, I need to put it inside of my loop, and look at that. Isn't that nice? If you're using a nice coding software, then most of the time it will keep the indents for you. So it just guesses that if you were indented before, you want to be indented afterwards. So count, and I could do this two ways to update it. I can either do count equals count plus 1. That works. Or I do count plus equals 1. That count plus equals 1 is just shorthand for saying find my variable count and add whatever this number to the right is to my variable count and then save it once again as count. It's just shorthand. It makes things nice. Okay. It says print out the value of count after each loop. Okay, so I'm still inside the loop then. I'm going to print count. Then after your for loop completes, so I got to get out of the for loop. So to get out of a for loop, go to the next line and move over. There you go. And we're going to define a variable called grade average. We're going to use our average equation to solve for that. So grade average is equal to sum of my grades divided by count. Okay, and we're going to print that out, grade average. So this is something we learned in Excel sections on statistics. We learned how to calculate an average. And so this should calculate the average of my grades. So just as a little sanity check, it should be less than 100 and more than 63, or more than 0. There you go, got 0 right there. If it's not, something went wrong. So let's run it. Okay, you can see count is printing out each time, 1 through 10, and I get an average which is 78.05. It worked. So huzzah, we can do it. Now, something to think about is that if you're going to need some variable besides your looping variable in the for loop, you need to define it before the for loop, not after. If you define a variable inside of a for loop, it will get overridden each loop. Maybe you want that, but if you don't want that, you gotta make sure that you define it above the for loop, not inside of it. So, use that to your advantage. In fact, let's go ahead and check this and see what happens if you make this mistake and you define a variable inside of the for loop when it should be before the for loop. Okay, so right here you see about expenses, and there's quite a few of them. And what I want to do is I want to subtract all of these expenses from my budget to see how much my budget is left. If I run this, oh, well, I forgot to tell it to print. Let's go ahead and make it print. So print budget left. Okay, so this should tell me how much money I have left is. $378.26. I had $400 to start. $378.26, and there's at least two like $100 expenses in here. Something doesn't add up. Now, what I tell you is that it's because we put this inside of our loop. Every single loop is getting reset to 400. So 400 minus roughly 100, 300. Next loop. Well, 400 again. Wait, what happened to the other thing? Well, you just told me it was 400 again. So that's how it does it. Python's going to do what you tell it to do. In this case, you told it to keep on resetting the value of your budget to 400 every single time. So if we want this to work like we want it to, we got to pull this guy outside. I'm going to run this with this indentation here and see what happens. As you can see, it doesn't like that. If you indent without reason, it will tell you. So let's get rid of that. Now let's see if it's okay with this space right here. It is. Didn't even mind that space at all. So you can have the spaces, you just can't have indentations where you're not supposed to have them, or not have indentations when you're supposed to have them. You have to do it. Now, if you're wondering, okay, this is what Python does, what do other codes do? Maybe you're not wondering this. Well, other codes usually have like brackets. Like here's a bracket to begin, here's a bracket to end. Everything in between is in my loop. However, all those codes also really want you to indent just so you can see it better, to make it more readable, but they just don't require it. I like Python because it forces you to make code that is readable, easy to look at. So be very careful about this. This is a very common mistake where you accidentally will put a variable inside of your loop instead of before it. So with that, we'll stop here, and we'll get into some harder examples next time. See y'all later. Bye-bye.